Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. Patriots Against CPS Corruption invites you to attend our March for Texas Children. DFPS has failed the families of Texas. The Texas Special Committee on DFPS has also failed to hear the parents and their children. Time to make our voices heard and surround yourself with those on the same mission as you. Join us on the March for Our Children, September 21st, 2022, starting at 1 p.m. at 701 West 51st Street, Austin, Texas, 78751. I have a return guest. I'm so glad to have James Schoch back on the show. He was last on January 9th, 2022, Season 3, Episode 3, with his attorney, Anna Avalone. Then he was back on the show March 20th, 2022, Season 3, Episode 37, with his attorney, Amy Cosentino, and she was from Florida. And we're going to talk about, the civil rights, the Second Amendment rights, fighting for some type of custody for your child. And we've got a lot to say. So I'm going to welcome James Schoch. Thank you so much for coming on Slam the Gavel.
Thank you so much, Marianne. It's a pleasure. And, I applaud you for your platforms and all your efforts and everything you've been through as well. And it's my pleasure to be back on the show.
Well, I'm glad to have you on because of the past two interviews that were disturbing. We, like to hear updates. Not everything can be positive in this family court issue, but sometimes
Correct.
you can have a minor victory that could mean so much.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's basically a war with many battles to be fought all along the way.
Costly
so basically,
as well.
as you said, we have a lot to cover, updates, and I guess we'll just dive right into it.
Definitely. So, how did Thursday and Friday go for you? Because I was on edge waiting to hear from you.
I hear you. Well, basically, Thursday the attorneys had an attorney conference only, and I'm very much opposed to that in any of these family court cases, if we can even call it family court, because it truly feels like criminal court. Regardless, with that being said, how can you have behind closed door meetings and your counsel isn't present? The mom, the dad, it makes no sense to me. They're making deals and or they're discussing things that, it only kicks the can down the road even longer, and it obviously costs, the cost goes up. So with that being said, Thursday overall, I didn't get really much out of it. It was just some general points that came my way. And, they're making it into a firearm issue, everything but the child. And I'll get to the Friday in a moment. I just want to touch on the OPSs that, mom and I, were on. And anyway, so with Anna, back on our first podcast, Anna had strategized to had some firearms, firearms surrendered, and they were under these temporary OPSs and whatnot. And there was never anything done to warrant such Second Amendment, violations. I never committed any crime. I don't have a parking ticket on me. You hear in this grand scheme of this whole Hollywood family court, the acting, the language gets into things like laying the silver bullet tactic on the other parent, whether that be the mom or the dad. It's pretty much, that's irrelevant because it attacks both genders, and they seem to target the caring and loving parent. So they had used that against me, which I called out in the courtroom personally, the AFC for the child on Friday, to question him about if that's the case, how was it violated? What was done? What was the crime? He conveniently got off the video because he didn't want to incriminate himself, because he could barely say it prior to that in, previous courtroom hearing, that I had, violated. He could barely get it under his breath as he mumbled it and said it very softly. So the recording probably didn't pick him up.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, you're an innocent person. In my case, I'm a father fighting for my son, and my only child. And we get into all the backdrop of it, where he was geographically located 2,000 miles away. It cost me $14,000 in Florida to get him back. I fought COVID. I missed 10 months of his life. This is all segue, but the thing is like, it brings us up to now in the present. So it can kind of give and maybe there's some new viewers out there that, they might have to go back and, hear those other podcasts, those other videos. So, today, the Friday, we just, I got in there and I called him out on it, because I'm going for the truth. Yes, they're violating my son's civil rights, grandmother rights, my civil rights, my Second Amendment rights. They're doing all these things on phony. There's nothing. There's nothing. They can't even answer you when you call them out. And I just want to say a big thank you to Tricia Lindsay, my current attorney. She fought tenaciously. Just and really stood up for the truth and debated professionally. And nothing is ever good enough, no matter how many hoops that the courtroom puts in front of me. I'm the circus animal, and they light the hoops on fire every time I have to go through them. And you can't put a price on your child or children. I think any parent can agree with that, especially you're just trying to have a relationship with them. In my case, I've just been going for 50-50 custody. But unfortunately, the opposing counsel, and they think this is normal. It's gone on so long, and all they're doing is they're stalling. They're using tactics to stall and debate and debate and debate, and to get me to go broke and to get me to give up, while he gets closer and closer to the school system. Because what that's going to do is, it's going to have an impact or an influence on, well, he needs to be longer now with the mom, because he's in school. These are the delayed tactics that, they just keep on kicking the can down the road. And frankly, I'm sick and tired of it. And, I want my son back. He should have never been taken from me temporarily, not even on paper, which is the best part about it, including the accusation against me. And I yet to see that on paper. I asked them to see it on paper. They won't. So, who's lying here? Who's lying? And, clearly it's them. And with that being said, I'm doing everything for James, my son, and just been trying to co-parent. I've demonstrated I co-parented for almost 3.5 years, and have spent in upwards of almost $150,000 on not being a deadbeat dad. And I don't want to be a deadbeat dad, because I love my son. I've made good memories with him. He was here approximately, living with me on my visitation, 4 days on, week off, 4 days on, and we were building great memories, and everything was working out. And we were attacked. We were viciously, blindsided attacked. I was called by CPS, and I said this on Friday. I was called by CPS back in November, December of 2021. My son's Christmas presents are still wrapped. They temporarily took him away from me because CPS had said the mother and your son are living in this situation, the home of a domestic violence felon. Okay, it is what it is. He's fighting in court this and that with her attorney representing her. So you want to talk about collusion and conflict of interest. But with
Mhm.
that being said, that's one thing, but my son is there.
Mhm.
And this, some of the charges, the things that they had said, of the 8 counts were, one of them was, I believe it was child neglect and child endangerment or something. Choked out his ex-wife twice. Now, again, that's his business.
Mhm.
I have no place in that. But
Right.
my son is living there.
Mhm.
My son is living there.
Mhm.
So my question, I guess, to the courts is, and to common sense is, if he has to share his children in, I don't know, visitation or supervise, I don't know, regardless, how is my son allowed to live there full time?
Mm.
And how is, and the quotes that were said in the courtroom were, when presented by Miss Anna Avalone to the AFC for the child, David Peck, how can you let the child live there like that? He said it was a moot point. And at the time, the judge had said something to the effect of, it's water under the bridge. And that's very
Mm.
disturbing because, I'm worried about my son. So,
Mhm.
because how do you, like, as a mother, as her as a mother, how is she going to control or watch him 24 hours, 7 days a week? Well,
Mhm.
the answer is you're not. You're
Mhm.
not. So, this is the same person that told me, she had 100 and some pound Rottweiler. She said, oh, yeah, I can control him. And not to demonize against the breed, but I mean, he was an infant down in Florida, and the dogs were, like biting at his feet, licking at his feet. His immune system wasn't developed. So these are normal things to mom,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that's disturbing. That's disturbing. And
Mhm.
I'm not here to bash the mom. Again, if I want, I've been only going for 50-50 custody.
Mhm.
I know, I understand that that's still his mother, and in some way, shape, or form, our son needs to be shared. That's
Mhm.
it. She has chosen to geographically go to the furthest distances. First was 2,000 miles away. Further, it's in upstate New York, purposely to parental alienate our son from me and my
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
And I just think that's not normal. But the excuse was, aside of the habeas corpus filed, which is to produce the body,
Mhm.
her excuse was, well, I want the father to have a relationship with the son. Well, how is that possible when in 10 months, you never even came back on your own. And then when you
Mhm.
did, you go even further away because you had nowhere else to go. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it just makes no sense. We need to start, if we're not going to do it in the courts, you know, and not really, gender, like you need to man up, you know what I mean? In this case, you
Mhm.
need to mom up, and,
Mhm.
we need to co-parent. He's, our son, and obviously, we both want the best for him, but I don't understand how, you know, the court can give her the residential custody when you don't own a house. You jump
Right.
from job to
Right.
job. How do you, you don't have an apartment. I mean, how are you going to do that? So, it makes no sense how they award, these type of benefits to the one parent against the other.
Mhm.
I have a solid job. I'm on my job approximately a little over 21 years now. And I work for a very large corporation,
Mhm.
state, what have you, state of New Jersey. So, you know, um, I mean, I have a small farm. I
Mhm.
have, things, I have good school system, and, and, I mean, we're not here really to go paper for paper, but, these are the type of factors that I always thought, maybe I'm wrong, it was the best interest of the child.
Mhm.
So apparently it's not. Apparently it's the interest of this,
Yes. It all kids
and,
for cash.
right. And a lot of people that I've talked to have gone through this have gone broke,
Mhm.
and even worse,
Mhm.
So, and they don't come out of it with any rights at all. How is that even possible when I've done nothing wrong? I've done everything he
Right.
asked of me to do
Yes, you
for
have.
him. Right. Because, I want to get him back. And again, false accusations, silver bullet tactics, I believe family court is a trap.
Mhm.
It's a trap for both parents, the child. It just, we need to look at, the disservices that family court, is doing to, the public. In some cases, you know, individuals can't afford an attorney. So now the state taxpayer is paying and paying and paying and paying and paying. So, we need to, empower people. We need to make more people aware of this. And we have to show that they are bullies.
Mhm.
They are bullies. And they do not want you to speak. They want you to remain silent all the way through. Well,
Mhm.
I'm silent no more. Because in that courtroom virtually on Friday, I said my piece and I spoke up and I did it for our son. And I'm going to keep speaking as long as it takes and as loud as it takes.
And I
And
was so
that's,
happy you said your piece because when you leave there, you want to at least walk out saying, I did everything I could. And I've known you since, I believe, late 2018, early 2019.
I believe that's correct, the timeline.
And I remember you telling me that when you got to see your son, I believe it was last year, that he said he saw his mother hit in the head, something to
That's
that effect.
correct. I had picked him up, I forget the exact timeline. I had picked him up as per the agreement, the custody order at the time. And he got in the car, and which was normal, car seat, ready to go, looking forward to his family on this side of the
Mhm.
river,
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, the side of the Big D, Delaware.
Mhm.
And hey, Poppy, hey, James, what's up? Mommy. I saw, what's up? What's up? What's going on, mommy? And mommy got hit in the head. She did. Oh, okay. Mommy got hit, or he said, Joe. And I said, oh, like in question form. And he said, Joe hit mommy in the head. Now, Joe, for you, her boyfriend's name, what have you. So, it just, everyone has a right for wellness checks. Every parent is concerned, obviously, when their son or daughter or children are not with them. Of course, we have to try and trust in the fact that they'll do the best for their child or children. But when your son, in my case, comes to you and he reports domestic violence to you immediately after getting in the car,
Mhm.
aren't, are you supposed to not look out for your son or daughter or children? Here we have a history of an individual of these counts, and again, that's his thing.
Mhm.
It is what it is. But, you know, they're allowing our son, all of them, including the AFC for the child of all people, appointed by the state and CPS, because they twist things and you can't
Mhm.
trust things. And I told the court on Friday, how is it that CPS called me and that, whatever, late November, early December, you temporarily suspend our son from coming to me for no reason. And they tell you, the court, about this and that, whether it was unredacted or not. And you turn it around on me. Is that because you wanted to get a better leverage, to even the scale in the courtroom? I don't know. But, I can only surmise that. But all I know is that when that information got to the court, it was either misconstrued, misrepresented, uh, spoken about in a different way. I have no idea. They wouldn't answer me. They wouldn't answer me because they know they can't handle the truth.
They can't. Now,
and it
can you
has to go to their script.
definitely their own narrative, but could you
Agreed.
explain what an AFC for the child is for parents that don't understand what that term is?
A good question. And I learned actually myself because CPS was involved down in Florida as well for some things like mold and of course the animals and the people that he was around. AFC for the child is basically they refer to it as a wellness attorney. Now that, and I'm not an expert on it, but that individual is paid by the state, and they're to speak for the child because he's so young, at least in my son's case. I don't know what age they go up to. I don't, that I do not know, but they're there to represent, in my son's case here, due to his age. However, it's been everything but. It's been everything but. So, and that's why it becomes so frustrating, because you're relying on a person to be impartial,
Mhm.
and it even states that in the paperwork, in the, not in the order, in the, whatever it is from the judge, I forget the language that they use, the not agreement, but whatever, that when the judge hands it down and
Mhm.
says, that it has to be mandated, okay, this and that, and things like if there was going to be a wellness, check on the home, and, things like that, that particular document.
Mhm.
So, it just, it is what it is. And he's not doing his job. He
Mhm.
has been against us from day one, from day one. I'm not getting a fair shake, and certainly my son is not getting a fair shake at it. So, you have an AFC who is against the father. You have obviously her attorney, against me because, well, she's getting paid to represent her, and that's understandable.
And isn't she
Um,
being paid by the state?
she was called out on it by a couple of my attorneys already, but I was told on numerous occasions that the mother went broke when she first came up here, and this and that, which is technically another good question. How can you take care of the child, especially when the support
Mm.
goes down? I mean, because as it stands right now, I take care of the entire daycare. I see the billing, everything, so I know what I'm paying, and it's just not, they're not considering these factors. They're not even taking this into account for his best interest.
Mhm.
But anyway, back to the AFC. Basically, he in my case, it's a man, David Peck. He's there to look out for him. He's not. There's a collusion.
Mhm.
He's friends with the judge, friends with the attorney. They're all, I don't know. Do they hang out at the same lunch table? I mean, it's just, start acting, start doing your job, so, and that's unequivocal proof that that's why he would go on and off video yesterday.
Mhm.
But, you know, the truth, the don't tread on me, don't tread on my son, my 2A rights, civil rights, all that is what this is about today. And, that day on Friday, I went in there, I was empowered. I, said what I had to say. I got it off my chest. I knew after almost 3.5 years, regardless, I was going to say it, and I did. And I did it
Mhm.
for my son. And I
Mhm.
feel so much better. And I just want to say for a lot of parents out there suffering and going through this right now, both man and woman, if you need to contact me, get in touch with me. I'll do what I can for you. I've had a lot of people, my support team and friends and coworkers, help me along the way, just talking to someone. But I'm going to tell you, when you finally get to that point and you're sick and tired of the injustice, and you're
Mhm.
sick and tired of being boot heel on your neck, down on the ground, you're doing everything you can for your child or children in this case, and nothing works. No amount of money, no amount of distance that you can go, I mean, I even pay for his health care, and I'm grateful to do so, because I want the best for my son. But, just hang in there, keep fighting as much as you can, talk, talk, and talk. Talk to people. Do not get marched into those ovens and keep silent. Break the
Mhm.
silence. We have to stand together. We have to stand tall. We have to hold our heads up high, and we have to support each other in this. And
Mhm.
that's my most direct and clear message. We have to fight for our rights.
Mhm.
And that's why I'm here today with these flags behind me. The
Mhm.
Don't Tread on Me, the Gadsden flag, and this one right here, the Second Amendment. And they're just
Mhm.
only two of many. And they
Mhm.
will violate many of your rights in this.
And I also tell parents, don't be ashamed if your child has been taken away from you based on a false allegation. Just come out and tell them why they were legally kidnapped. I do this all the
Absolutely.
time. I have no shame in telling people what exactly happened to my kids at the hands of this corrupt family collusive. I can't call it court. I won't do that.
Cartel,
Yeah. Extortion racket.
extortion racket, exactly. Because they seem to be running parallel with it. You know,
Mhm.
they they own the justice, the police, they have the laws, they rewrite the laws. I mean, next thing you know, you feel like you're going to be marched off to a gulag, never to be seen again.
Mhm.
I mean,
Well, yeah.
come on, this is ridiculous. It's designed to break the family. It's
Mhm.
designed to, take families apart, values out of it. Again, because if it was in the best interest of the child, it would be pretty much cut and dry, and it wouldn't go on and on and on and on.
And that's the sad part, is that things could actually be done in one day. I interviewed Angel Law, I believe that was Friday. And in California, I mean, you could sit down and get your divorce done in one day. And why can't this all be taken care of within 1 to 2 days of, we're gonna share the kid, provided the other parent is completely fit. Of
Mhm.
course, that's a given. Everyone wants shared parenting, and every kid has every right to see both parents.
Right.
Um, but
How is
then
it that, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead.
I mean, how is it that, I'd like to touch on just a couple other quick things. Number one, the health, of the person actually fighting and going through this. And also, I want to say that, what you can expect from CPS and getting involved in things like supervised visitation and whatnot.
Mhm,
You have to understand that, you know, you say to yourself, oh, it can't happen to me. Well, wrong. I want to tell people, out there that are going through it early on, because if you already got to that point, well, you missed the warning signs of the other person,
mhm,
the red flags, so to speak. So if you're that far into it and everything's going fine and everything's working out and you're, trying to come up with a plan of custody, just be weary that, CPS is not your friend. They're also not your children's friend or child, what have you. So, be careful what you say to them. And, you know, I mean, because they will use and twist things against you. And even
mhm,
if in my case, like where I hardly even said anything to them, I think the phone conversation was less than 30 seconds. I mean, they will, report what they wish to report.
mhm,
And, and then the courts, will take it and twist it around as well. So I want, your viewers, your listeners to be aware of that and put that down as a major point. And also, I just like to touch on the health, of the people going through this. It will take you down, as strong as you are, it will test you. And you have to understand, you have to take care of yourself, because if
mhm,
there is no yourself, well, then there is nothing for your child or children.
mhm.
You have to
Mhm.
understand that, you know, that child or children need you. And there may come a day when, you will get that custody that, your children deserve to be with
Mhm.
you. And you want to make sure that you're in the best, frame of mind and in the best health that you can be in. So try and eat healthy as best you can. Try and do your exercise. It'll only get rid of the stress. Take it out on, working out. If you can't run, jog. If you can't jog, walk. you
Mhm.
know, Pump a little iron, do some push-ups, do some sit-ups, whatever you can do some pull-ups, join a club, get involved, be with other people of like-minded people going through this, but
Mhm.
don't consume yourself in it. Don't get into a point where you're in a rut and you put it in four-wheel drive and you still can't get out, but now you have to wait for a tow, because you may be waiting forever
Right,
to
and
get out.
also, like you said, talk about this with like-minded people. There are people that, will listen to your story and then just walk away. So, you know, you're trying to
True.
educate people.
And there's other people as well to interject on that. There's other people, and it could be family and or friends
Mhm.
who've never been through it. And you're going to find that you may actually have more support from, people you don't even know. But I
Mhm.
can tell you from experience, people that have been through it, in my opinion, that's your best support team, because they know what you're going through. They may not be exactly, what you're going through, but they're there. Believe me, they're there. And
Mhm.
they're going to give you the most, you know, commonality support to say, because they know the roller coaster ride. They know the
Mhm.
ins and outs. And listen, I have gotten a lot of good support in the past almost 3.5 years from a lot of good people, friends, coworkers, family. I just think that at the end of the day, you know, the people that have been through it, the same hardships that you're sharing, the same absence that, you're going through from not seeing, your sons and daughters, that's where it touches your heart, because again, as you said, Marion, kidnapped, you
Mhm.
know, it may not be a crime. The person had a right to do it. You want to say absconded? We could use the word, but there's no way you're going to convince the heart of a person, because that's what it feels like.
Mhm.
So you can put all the laws you want to say and this and that, but at the end of the day, they were kidnapped. And in
Mhm.
my case, twice. And
Mhm.
that's what it that's what the hell it feels like. And
Mhm.
it's a horrible feeling. I don't wish it on anyone,
Mhm.
and in this case, his youth, they're taking advantage of that because he doesn't know. But now, he's been talking, talking, talking. So they want to hide, this supposed classified address. Well, how can you have a classified address when you're living with that?
Mhm.
How's that even
Mhm.
make sense? You want to
Eh,
be so scared of me or whatever you want to say of me. No, no. And this is for the courts. The reason why they did that, it wasn't really, I don't think, because they didn't want me to know where my son was, especially I was on child support from day one. I was
mhm.
sending her checks
Mhm.
before I was even ordered to do so.
Mhm.
All paperwork signed, everything. I thought I was going to have more kids. But the thing is like, how is it even possible when, you're living in that situation? It was to hide. It was to hide. And the
Mhm.
courts were behind it. The
And
courts were behind it, and they still are.
and can I add that this
Sure.
little boy, James, is witnessing and watching how his mother is being treated, and he's learning on how to treat women. And this is psychological child abuse.
Absolutely.
And this can be found in the DSM-5 V995.51, child psychological abuse. They're all participating, with the exception of your attorneys, are participating in child psychological abuse, especially her attorney. And, and the judge however she rules will also participate in child psychological abuse.
Agreed. Very good points that you raised. No one wants anything to happen to, your children or the mom or dad, domestic violence. But my point is to add to what you said is, how is it that, a person with no domestic violence, no injunctions in almost whatever it is, 5 states, New Jersey, Connecticut, New York, Florida, Pennsylvania. How is it with no injunctions filed, with no police involved, no parking tickets, no domestic violence, no nothing, that's to be allowed, and even whether in this case, whether there was actually physical or even verbal, my son was coming to me at a very young age, trying to like hit his head. He was acting out on what he's seen. And no, don't, what are you doing? What are you doing? And then he was saying things to us like, are you going to hurt me? Are you going to hurt me? It's like, well, who's filling his head with that? That's at the time, he was like 2 years old or 2 years old in a couple of months. He didn't learn that from me. He didn't learn that from here. He was coached. He was coached. So you know what? You get to a point where First Amendment, and you're going to say it, and you're going to tell it all, because you know what? I'm not holding back anymore. It's the truth. And people have to be educated. People have to know what to expect, because there's what, 360 million roughly people in this country, and this epidemic is happening all around the world, especially in the UK, Canada, and European, a lot of European countries. And I don't know how many millions actually the statistics in the United States, but I'm sure it's in the millions. So we need to educate people, and we need to talk to one another and empower one another and support one another. And and I don't want to sound like a broken record on that, but it's what we got to do. And they are doing a disservice and an injustice to the children.
The thing is, this is going to affect generations to come. In Dr. Mark Grossman's book, Preserving Family Ties, he writes that this will affect 6 future generations. These judges and these opposing attorneys that, I mean, whatever their client is telling them, they should just, everyone automatically just get a psych eval before you even walk into that place. It's actually a torture chamber.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had a forensic, can't even call her a doctor. Her credentials weren't even sound. She had a highway, a mile long on her, with reviews and her credibility, the Google reviews, in the bankruptcies, the liens on her. I mean, the character of this, again, she wasn't a doctor. She was I think a psychologist at the time, but very biased, very, very one-sided, handpicked by the courts. I was told by other attorneys that I contacted, and they gave me the advice on Allison Bell, that she was known in the community. So they handpicked her. And it was presented to me at the time that, oh, she's the cheapest. And, when they said cheapest, it was like $3,000, and it was supposed to be split 3 ways by myself, the mother, and the state. I wound up spending like $3,000. I was like, what happened with that? What happened to 3 ways? Yeah. So, and the state wound up not spending anything. And I think mom wound up spending $1,000 or something, which I don't even, I don't know. That's what was told to me anyway, but.
Well, and this is what the taxpayer needs to know.
Correct.
There's things the taxpayer needs to know.
Exactly. all this going on, and the taxpayer's been footing the bill on the other end for, like I said, almost 3.5 years, including in Florida too, not just not just here,
Yes. Yes.
and you know, I mean, we're just trying to expose it. I mean, come on already. In my case, I'm never going to get these times back with him,
No.
and they think this is normal behavior. And, and I'm missing out on so much,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it breaks my heart that, they just won't do the right thing. And especially with a dad who's been there, I mean, like, who wants the child, to be in my life. I
Hmm.
mean, it makes no sense, and so
Yeah.
unfortunately, you just keep going, you just keep fighting, and you
Mhm.
just try and expose it, and let others know that what's going on. And you just get to a point where you get to that courtroom, and you just say to yourself, enough is enough.
Mhm.
And you're going to have your moment, and you're not going to say anything threatening, you're not but you're just going to be civil, be polite, ask the judge for permission to speak, thank the judge. I mean, that's you know your character. And you know I mean, I was in there, and mom had to go, and it was like
Mhm.
it wasn't even 1,600 hours yet. It was not even over with. And mom had to go, and she asked the judge for permission to leave. And I mean, it was like, what? Well, things come up, things come up. Well, what about this thing? And, I have, 3 other kids to pick up. Well,
Mm.
wait a minute, you're here for your son. Well, it's an emergency. Really? Well, isn't your son an emergency?
And the
So,
judge said that.
and the judge said that, correct. And truth. So, the judge knows, and I mean, come on, like, how, like, how could you, I mean, I understand we all have responsibilities and, things to do, but, this was only 2 hours out of the
Mhm.
day for our son,
Mhm.
and no resolution. They just want to keep attacking me on my Second Amendment rights to try and keep my son away from me.
Mhm.
And I want
Right.
to say too, I just want to add one other thing to that. I have contacted Guns America, organizations like the NRA. I'm actually a life member. No one wants to help you. USA, CCW, whatever, concealed carry. No one wants to help you with family court. So for all you members out there, I don't know what to tell you. They're big organizations, I mean,
Well,
you
then
know,
why contribute to an organization that isn't gonna say, "Okay, let's look at your case." Yeah,
agreed.
I mean, they make so much money. I'm sure they can have one of their attorneys look at this and at least write a document up for you to take into court to say, "You have no gun violations," whatever.
Correct.
They're not doing their job either.
No, they're not. And I even asked them on that point, I said, they didn't even have to do a document for me. Like, it didn't even have to go that far. I asked them, just point me in the direction of
Mhm.
a Second Amendment attorney to fight on that issue. And the irony and the hypocrisy of it is, you know, guns, up America, whatever, up in New York there, they had filed, and they had this big lawsuit. And recently we just had actually the Supreme Court. Um, we just had the Supreme Court rule that the license to carry, is outside the home. So, New York is actually being challenged on that as well. These shall issue states, and also the opposing counsel in there, Mrs. Sherry Rackman, she actually attacked my licenses. My concealed carry, resident Pennsylvania, what
She
have
had no
you.
business doing that.
No, she did not.
Very unprofessional. Mm.
Agreed. And, I have another license, non-res Florida, FFL, hunting license. I mean, and even my attorney argued, you're taking food off this man's table.
Mhm.
This man utilizes and eats well through his, rights and his, state and what have you, of his ability to hunt and, store food
Mhm.
and supplement,
Mhm.
my grocery. And they don't care. They don't care.
But,
So,
your
mhm.
attorney, attorney Tricia Lindsay, and she's from the law office of Tricia Lindsay PC, and she litigates, criminal defense, civil litigation, family and matrimonial law, personal injury, wills, trusts, and estates. She did a fantastic job for you yesterday, arguing
Yes,
for you.
absolutely. Yes. So, it's a very frustrating time, in there for the attorneys, when they're speaking out and everyone's trying to speak over each other. And
Mhm.
it was, oh, it was quite the courtroom. But, at the end of the day, at the end of it all, they're still attacking my rights to try and, come up with nonsense to
Mhm.
keep, my son away from me.
Mhm. And
And it's wrong.
they can't seem to get it through their heads that the guns are gone. They're
Correct.
absolutely
Yes.
gone, gone.
Thank you. Correct. And I think what they're trying to do is, I think they act like, okay, well, once this gets resolved, I'll never have firearms again, or I'll never go hunting again. And I think that's actually coming from mom, because I
Mhm.
don't think, mom really is pro hunter. And that's fine. Everyone, has their opinion or their beliefs or views. But, again, I'm licensed within the state. I mean, I would even get the non-resident New Jersey license, so I mean, and I've been educated even, not also by the states in their programs, at a very young age, 10, 11 years old. But all along the way, US Army, Army National Guard. I mean, I've always been a responsible, law-abiding gun owner and educated, hunter and firearm, I mean, it just, you know, so, they have to understand that it's personal property.
Mhm.
And, what are they gonna do? Tell me to, you know, give up my vehicles next or something, and who to sell them to, who not to sell them to? You
Well,
know,
what
they're in
about
compliance with
knives?
Pennsylvania law, and that's what they
Mhm.
don't understand. I don't
Mhm.
reside in New York, and I'm within the federal and state well, whatever guidelines, laws, what we have to
That's
say. So,
true. Yes.
yep,
Well, then what about knives? What about your kitchen knives? What about your steak
agreed.
knives? Y
Agreed. Do they, I use a chainsaw for felling some, trees for firewood. Are they going to
Mhm.
tell me, if my son comes to me now, they don't want him around a chainsaw? You know what I mean? Granted, yeah, he's young. I'm not going to do that now, but I'm saying, as he gets older, I don't think they trust me to raise, a child. I think that they've put me in this, box and put a lid on it and just put a label. That's what they've
Right.
done. Discrimination, I and bias. I think they just see me as that way. Yes, I'm passionate about my rights. I mean, I grew up with them. But
Mhm.
even before the farm, I grew up in the city, city of Trenton. So,
Mhm.
I mean, it just, I mean, come on, it's like, I don't know. There seems to be like no convincing them. So no matter what you
Yeah.
do.
Now it's very frustrating, and we'll just have to see what the outcome is from this case that
Mhm,
happened on Thursday and Friday,
mhm.
um, because
I
really
trust, mhm.
go ahead.
No, I should say, I trust in the end that the judge will make the right decision. I,
Mhm.
I, I truly do believe that. I believe that she's going to weigh everything
Mhm.
and, I mean, and see that, I mean, and go from there, I mean, for the longest time, mom hid her firearm and had an outburst in one of the courtrooms. And it was quite the eye opener for the judge to see, because I had been finger pointed at from all along the way. So, I mean, we have name, rank, and serial number for her firearm. So, I mean, it's like the old saying, you shouldn't, live in a glass house if you're going to throw rocks or throw stones, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
It seems like in these places they can say whatever they want and come out with anything, and then they go along with that narrative.
they do. And pretty much the definition of that is communism or Marxism. We're supposed to be in a constitutional republic in this country, not a democracy, a republic. For as many, people, they want to hear that, but that's the truth. And in that republic, we have this Constitution, Bill of Rights in place, first 10 amendments. They should be abiding by that. And where's your due process? If you're accusing me of something, if you're, labeling me as something, then let's go. Let's do it. What are we doing in family court? Shouldn't we be in criminal court? I mean, it makes no sense. So they just spin it, twist it, play games, stretch the money, kick the can down the road. I think that's ultimately what it's all about. They don't care about mom, dad, child, children, whatever. They just care about getting as much money as they can, rubber stamping it some, in some cases, I'm sure you've heard a lot, tons and tons of cases, I mean, and then just moving on to the next victim.
Right.
So,
and I'm so sorry you're going through this.
Thank you, Mary. And I'm very sorry of your, case as well that you went through for years, and, the pain that you endured and carried, and, it just seems like, this torch needs to burn out instead of having it passed on from person to person, victim to victim, in this game. So this game of theirs, I mean, I feel like I'm in Alice in Wonderland and I'm sitting at the table, and, the characters, the rabbit, the Mad Hatter, and and they hand me a cup for coffee, and it's not this big, it's this big, and like, and everybody's talking about, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different things. And next thing you know, you're going down the rabbit hole. And it's like, you just can't get out. I mean, it's like, there is not 1 ounce of common sense in family court.
No, there is not. No,
there is not,
And especially when they target you, whether you're a mother or father, if you're
Agreed.
a target, for whatever reason, they're going to go with that.
Oh yeah.
Because my opposing, he was horrible, but I could handle him, but he shot out that I was mentally ill. Oh, suddenly I'm mentally ill now. So because he said it?
Right. Yeah.
Okay,
who is he, a doctor?
Right. When did he get his MD? And how does a registered nurse of almost 23 years go batshit crazy overnight? It just doesn't happen that way.
Correct.
And a judge should have caught, well, they were BFFs. Let's put that aside. But a hopefully normal judge would have caught on to that and shut him down.
Right. Makes sense.
Yes, but there is none in this place. And
exactly. Say very similar, how can you take, a law-abiding, firearm owner, avid hunter, what have you, since the age of 10 or 11? I mean, and, of all these years go, and then just all of a sudden now, oh, well, you're, we can't have you we have to temporarily suspend him. Makes no sense. Makes no sense. Okay. Show me then. Show me then. Where, why, when, how? Can't. They can't, because blank piece of paper.
Right.
Ridiculous.
How sad to put a parent through that.
It is. And in your case, it's even more sad because they destroy your career. That's I can't even imagine. I mean, like, in the medical field, and that's a good field, and as a registered nurse, you know what I mean? Like, it just ridiculous.
Oh, it was. It was a
Yeah.
three-ring circus. It really was a three-ring circus in there.
Mm-hmm.
And people need to know this when they go in there, you're gonna be fired at from all different directions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, this judge, I don't know. I'd like to know what he was on because one minute he's talking about a pension fund, then he's bringing up child support, and then he's talking about child custody, and then he starts talking about the pension fund again. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
can we get can we stay on topic with something? Because this is taking up the whole day. Parents don't
Right.
realize that when you go in there, this could be sucking up the whole day with an attorney. That could be an $1,800 day.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But I'm so
It,
glad.
yeah, I mean, it, and you just often wonder, like, well, is it just like good acting and, they're doing
Mhm.
it just to, like I said earlier, kick the can down the road,
In your
get,
case, I hope not. I hope there's a decision that is a good outcome for in
thank
your
you.
sake, not just your sake, but for your little boy's sake, you
Exactly.
know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. And so do I, because, he's been gone long enough. I mean, like they had even put me back in, I don't know, back then into like supervised visitation with a social
Right.
worker. How
Mhm.
does that even happen? Oh, well, you have to pay for it. What?
Yes.
So you drive all the way up there, go on a Saturday, pay, almost $500 or whatever for a few hours, couple hours. And,
Mm,
and after the first hour, it broke my heart. My son
mm.
asked me, "Are you my daddy?
Oh my
Are
god.
you my daddy?" You
Mm,
know, after that little boy was with me for like around 2 years, you know, and it was like, really? And he was
mhm,
coming along beautifully, eating well, enjoying himself, growing, exercising, like, he would be running around and, you know, climbing here and there on a little dirt hill and stuff, just having a
mhm,
good time, just being a kid, being a boy,
mhm,
and experiencing the farm and everything. And it just broke my heart.
mhm.
And, and I told him, I said, yeah, I said, James, I said, you already know the answer to that question. I said, absolutely. I said, you just want me, to confirm that to you. He said, I know, Poppy, I know. So
Yeah.
it was
You know, I
cute.
he probably knows a lot more than what we think he knows.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, and it doesn't have to be I don't know, her versus me. I just listen, she left me. I don't know
Right.
what to say. And she didn't go 20 minutes over that way. She went 2,000 miles that way with a 7-week old. It's, you know, immune system ain't developed, but, get him in a car seat. I mean, come on now. That's just extreme, So it was
Mm,
premeditated, pre-planned, and watch out for things too. Like, if you do have someone, and this goes out to, a lot of young men and women out there, or, just middle-aged, whatever, if you suspect that you might be cheated on or this or that, check their Facebook friends. In this case, her boyfriend now was a Facebook friend with 2 accounts back
mhm,
then, and it's very likely that, she was the cause of the marriage breakup between the both of them, but whatever, that's neither here nor there. You know what I mean?
mhm,
That's just, but it's just when you look back and you see all the things later, and you see things that you didn't see then, you know, I think we're just trying to make the viewers aware of some of the signs that, you know, that they could maybe be aware to look for,
mhm,
especially things like jealousy. If you're being accused or called or text 24 hours, 7 days a week by
mhm.
the girlfriend or the boyfriend, whatever, that's a red flag, right there. I didn't see that at the time, but obviously now I do. But, so you want to look for things like that, if you're getting into a relationship, watch how deep you go,
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning into the relationship. Do a lot more listening to the other person, and maybe pick up on things they might be saying or doing, behavior. And, that'll tell you right there,
Mm-hmm.
and if you do have a question about it, there's always people that you can ask.
Mm-hmm.
There's always help, and there's apps out there that, things to look for when you're getting into a relationship, and see, the signs of you know, what to pick up on, or what to ignore, or what to, so
Mm-hmm. Very good point.
thank you.
Because some of these people, it's like they're so excited that they finally found someone, and
Right,
they may be a genuine person themselves, but then they meet someone who did not have the right upbringing, and you got to ask, how was your childhood? What happened in your childhood? And I mean, I did that as well, but I was only 28 at the time. I wasn't connecting the dots as
right.
to what really happened in the childhood.
Mhm. Yeah, there was some things I found out on the points you mentioned, that I found them out later,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't connect the dots, because the dot trail didn't start until a little bit later, but by then there was other things already in place, other factors. So,
Mm-hmm.
even if I would have started connecting the dots, and then, but it is what it is. And I'm grateful for my son. I love him. He's the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And
Mm-hmm.
I just want to get him back in my life. And I've been doing the right thing for him, whether they want to hear it or not. My actions prove it. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, so 7 attorneys, 5 states. I mean, this is our third, podcast, video show, what have you. I mean, how much more do I have to demonstrate that I want my son in my life? I mean, and it has to be in a good custody role. I mean, like the
Mm-hmm.
joint legal custody that's on paper now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, hopefully they'll do, the right thing at the end of it all, and, we'll go from there, so.
And yes, I will have you back on for an update. And it would be great if we could have Tricia Lindsay on with you. That would be awesome.
That would
Y-
be, yeah, that would be great.
mm,
So I know her schedule was really tight for September, um, like, late August and September. So,
mhm,
I think that's, at the, where we're at now with it. So maybe at the end of September,
mhm,
we can check again, or,
mhm.
October possibly,
Sure. Sure.
and, so, we have a court date for Pennsylvania, because, for your viewers, the custody is in New York, um, but the support is Pennsylvania. So,
Mm,
it
yeah.
is, it's not uncommon, is what I'm trying to say. It's not uncommon to have, support in one state and custody in another. It makes it more complicated, but, it's nothing you can't work around, or modify, and whatnot. So, you know,
Definitely. I know you and I will keep in touch when this order comes in, and have you back on really soon. How can people reach you? Because I know I sent a mom to you for help, that
oh,
thinking you.
yes. A mom, reached out to me on Facebook through Messenger.
Mhm,
But if you want to reach out to me, um, you can do that as well. It's Jim, and then Schoch, Schoch, and you'll see, as of now, and it's been up there a while now, my little boy on the left, and, I'm on the right. And I believe at the time we were, doing a little, bubble blowing.
okay.
So, yeah. So you could hit me up through Messenger on there. If you want to get me on, my email, you can do that as well. Just request, just ask Marianne, just ask Marianne through it, or ask me through my Facebook Messenger. That's
Mhm.
fine. So, and then, just want to really put it out there like super public. That's all. So,
Definitely.
yeah,
This
so
helps others. So,
absolutely. I've been
yeah.
talking to, yeah, some that you
Mhm.
sent my way.
Well, I'm glad. But hey, don't jump off. Slam
Hmm.
the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again in the future with Mr. James Schoch and other exciting guests. Thank you again.
Thank you, Marianne, for having me. Pleasure. And, I hope your viewers and everyone, enjoys.
Definitely.
Thank you.